The summons? Kira Valen had never expected her diplomatic career to lead her through a corridor that predated human writing. The walls of the Threshold Station shimmered with crystalline memory scripts, each one documenting treaties older than Earth's sun. She walked beside Ambassador Thelcorum, whose 6 eyes blinked in an unsettling cascade as he guided her toward the reception chamber. "You understand, Delegate Valen, that the Dominarchs do not summon species lightly," Thelcorum said, his translator rendering his chittering voice into smooth standard. "In their 23 million years of documented history, they have initiated first contact only 47 times. Kira adjusted the ceremonial sash across her charcoal suit. "And humanity makes 48. Indeed. Though I confess I cannot fathom why." She'd wondered the same thing during the 3-week journey from Earth's outer territories. Humanity had been a spacefaring civilization for barely 2 centuries. They'd established colonies on 12 worlds, made contact with 16 species, and generally kept their heads down in a galaxy that had been conducting business since humans were still figuring out fire. The Dominarch Empire, by contrast, was eternal. They had witnessed the birth and death of countless civilizations. Their archives contained the final words of species that had turned to dust before Earth's dinosaurs walked. When other races spoke of them, it was in whispers, part reverence, part terror. The Dominarchs didn't conquer. They didn't need to. They simply endured, watching empires rise and crumble like sandcastles before an infinite tide. The reception chamber doors opened without sound, revealing a space that hurt to perceive. The architecture existed in too many dimensions, creating angles that shouldn't work but did. At the chamber's center stood 3 figures, each radiating an aura of compressed time. The Dominarchs themselves. They were humanoid in the way that evolution occasionally repeated successful patterns, but their skin held the texture of starlight trapped in amber. Runes crawled across their bodies, living history. Kira realized each symbol a compressed archive of entire epochs. The central figure stepped forward. "Kira Valen of Earth. I am eldest Morvain. My colleagues are Chronicler Yashin and Keeper Delthra. We have observed your species for 37 of your years. We have questions." Kira bowed, trying to ignore how her instincts screamed that these beings could erase her from existence with a thought. "I'm honored to answer, eldest. Why do you apologize so frequently?" The question caught her completely off guard. What?" Morvain's head tilted, and Kira felt the weight of eons in that gaze. "We have monitored your transmissions, your literature, your diplomatic exchanges. Humans apologize constantly, for being late, for speaking, for existing in proximity to others. You apologize even when you have committed no transgression. This is unique among spacefaring species." Kira felt her cheeks warm. Of all the questions she'd prepared for, military capabilities, resource distribution, territorial ambitions, this wasn't one of them. "It's cultural, I suppose. A way of maintaining social harmony." "Fascinating," Chronicler Yashin said, their voice like wine through ancient stones. "And these memes your species creates? You compress complex philosophical concepts into images with text overlays, then use them to process collective trauma. Why? Because laughing at the darkness makes it less frightening?" Kira offered. Keeper Delthra moved forward, their eyes shimmering with fractal patterns. "Your species has existed in the greater galactic community for 173 standard years. In that time you have started 0 wars, annexed 0 territories, and committed 0 acts of genocide against other species. Yet your own history is saturated with such violence. What changed?" Kira took a breath. This, at least, she could answer. "We got tired of it. We looked at the stars and realized that if we didn't stop killing each other, we'd never reach them. It wasn't wisdom, it was exhaustion. We chose to be better because being terrible was getting us nowhere." The 3 Dominarchs exchanged glances that contained entire conversations. "And when the Kreshvoth attacked your colony on Redstone Summit," Morvain continued, "killing 4,000 of your people, you responded with sanctions? Trade restrictions? You did not retaliate militarily." "The Kreshvoth were desperate," Kira said quietly. "Their homeworld was dying. They struck out in fear. We chose to understand rather than escalate. Even when it cost you 4,000 lives? Especially then. Violence would have cost far more." The silence that followed felt like the universe holding its breath. Finally, eldest Morvain spoke. "In 23 million years, we have watched species evolve, expand, and extinguish themselves or others. The pattern is inexorable. The strong dominate. The weak perish. Civilizations rise on mountains of corpses. This is the way of the cosmos." Morvain stepped closer, and Kira felt the crushing weight of ages pressing down. Yet you humans stumble into the galactic arena, young and foolish, and you apologize. You make jokes about your own inadequacy. You choose mercy when vengeance is expected. You break the pattern, Delegate Valen. And that terrifies us. Kira's throat went dry. Why? Because, Keeper Delthora said softly, in all our existence, we have never encountered a species that might actually survive themselves. And if you do, everything we understand about the universe will need to be rewritten. The implications crashed over Kira like a wave. So, she managed, what happens now? Eldest Morvain's expression might have been a smile. Now, Delegate Valen, we discuss why we have invited you here. The galaxy is about to face a crisis that has ended civilizations before. And we believe humanity's strange, illogical approach to existence might be the only thing that can save it. The ancient threat. The dimensional architecture of the chamber shifted, and suddenly Kira stood before a projection of the galaxy itself. Stars gleamed like scattered diamonds against velvet darkness, spiral arms rotating in stately grace. It was beautiful, until sections of it began to dim. The recursion, Eldest Morvain said, their voice heavy with something Kira might have called fear if these ancient beings were capable of such emotion. It returns every 7 million years like clockwork. We have survived it twice before. Barely. Kira watched as entire stellar regions in the projection faded to black, spreading like rot through the galactic disk. What is it? Chronicler Yashin gestured, and the view zoomed to show a phenomenon that made Kira's eyes water. Space itself seemed to be folding, reality collapsing inward on itself in cascading waves. An extra-dimensional predation event. Something from outside our universe that consumes matter, energy, and information itself. It doesn't destroy civilizations, it erases them as if they never existed. The first recursion eliminated 93% of all spacefaring species, Keeper Delthora added. The second took 67% of what remained. Each time, civilizations band together, pool their resources, and fight. Each time, most of them die. The pattern has held for 14 million years. Kira felt her stomach knot. And you think humanity can help somehow? We barely have faster-than-light travel. Our most advanced weapons would be toys compared to what you must possess. Your weapons are irrelevant, Morvain said bluntly. Every civilization fights the recursion the same way, with overwhelming force, with logic, with calculated strategies refined over millennia. They throw warships and antimatter and weapons that crack planets. They pour resources into shields and temporal displacement and dimensional anchors. And they die. Because the recursion adapts, Yashin continued. It learns. It consumes information about our tactics and evolves countermeasures. The more logically we fight, the more efficiently it defeats us. Kira began to understand. You want us to fight illogically. Delthora's fractal eyes brightened. We want you to do what you do best. Break the pattern. Your species excels at improvisation, at finding unexpected solutions, at making leaps of logic that make no sense but somehow work. Your military history is filled with victories that should have been defeats, strategies that violated every tactical principle but succeeded anyway. You're talking about desperation plays, Kira said. Hail Mary passes. We do those because we're usually outmatched, not because they're good tactics. Precisely, Morvain said. You fight like a species that has already lost, so you have nothing to lose. You try things that shouldn't work. And sometimes they do. The projection shifted, showing a timeline. The recursion would reach the galactic rim in 18 standard months. After that, it would sweep inward, consuming everything in its path. Current estimates gave the combined galactic civilizations a 12% chance of survival if they followed standard protocols. The Galactic Concordat will convene in 3 weeks, Yashin said. Every major civilization will send representatives. They will argue, eventually agree to form a united defense, assign resources based on calculated risk assessments, and prepare to fight the same battle they've fought twice before. And they'll probably lose, Kira finished. Most will perish, Morvain agreed. But this time we want to try something different. We want humanity to have a voice in the strategic planning. We want your perspective at the highest levels of decision-making. Kira almost laughed. You want to base the survival of galactic civilization on the input of a species that's barely 200 years old? The other delegates will never accept it. They will if we endorse you, Delthora said. The Dominarch's recommendation carries significant weight. We have survived 2 recursions. Others will listen. But there's resistance already, Yashin added, waving a hand. The projection changed, showing what looked like a news broadcast from a dozen different alien networks. Kira couldn't understand most of the languages, but the images were clear: human faces marked with contemptuous graphics, demonstrations outside human embassies, angry crowds of various species. The Valdrant Collective believes humans are too inexperienced, Morvain explained. The Crystalline Assembly thinks you lack the necessary computational capacity. The warrior clans of Kesh consider you soft, unwilling to make hard sacrifices. And the Merchant combines fear you'll disrupt established power structures. So I'd be walking into a hostile environment with species that have been doing this for millions of years, most of whom think we're idiots or cowards, and I'm supposed to convince them to abandon tried-and-true strategies in favor of, what? Winging it? Yes, all three Dominarchs said simultaneously. Kira ran a hand through her dark hair. This is insane. By conventional standards, certainly, Morvain agreed. But sanity has a poor track record against the recursion. We need insanity. We need unpredictability. We need someone who will stand before the most powerful beings in the galaxy and suggest strategies that sound completely absurd. Why me specifically? Kira asked. There are other human diplomats with more experience. Because, Delthera said, accessing some hidden archive, when you were 17 years old and 3 armed raiders broke into your family home on Europa Colony, you defended your younger siblings by convincing the raiders you had rigged the entire habitat section with explosives and would detonate them if they didn't leave. You had no such explosives. I was bluffing, Kira said quietly. You were creating an illogical scenario that your opponents couldn't risk calling, Yashin corrected. You turned certain defeat into stalemate through sheer audacity. That's precisely what we need. Morvain stepped forward. Delegate Valen, we are offering you a position as strategic consultant to the Galactic Concordat Defense Planning Committee. You will have full access to our intelligence, our resources, and our support. But you will face opposition, contempt, and likely numerous attempts to undermine or remove you. The eldest extended a hand, human style, a gesture clearly researched. Will you help us break the pattern? Kira looked at that offered hand, at the weight of eons behind it, and thought about 4,000 dead on Redstone Summit. About choosing understanding over vengeance. About humanity's strange, stumbling path through a galaxy that didn't quite know what to make of them. She took the hand. I'll need a team. Assembling the illogical. The human delegation quarters aboard Threshold Station were modest by Dominarch standards, which meant they were roughly the size of a small stadium. Kira sat at a table that had grown itself from the floor at her request. The station's responsive architecture still unnerved her, and reviewed personnel files on her data pad. She needed people who could think sideways. People who wouldn't be intimidated by beings older than mountains. People who were, ideally, just a little bit crazy. The door chimed. Come in, Kira called. A tall man with copper skin and graying temples entered, moving with the careful precision of someone used to zero-gravity environments. Captain Jace Northwood reporting as requested. Though I gotta say, Delegate, my service record clearly lists me as retired. It also lists you as the only human to successfully navigate the Vortis exclusion zone using nothing but visual piloting and what you described in your report as vibes. Jace grinned. The instruments were all malfunctioning. I had to eyeball it. The Vortis zone has spatial distortions that make conventional navigation impossible. Automated systems fail. Mathematical calculations produce nonsensical results. But you flew a supply ship through it by feel. Spent 20 years as an ice hauler in the Kuiper Belt before FTL was common. You learn to trust your gut when the sensors lie. He settled into a chair. So what's this about? The message said critical mission, need for unconventional thinking, possible death or glory. I'm 63. Death and glory both sound more interesting than retirement. Kira smiled. How do you feel about saving the galaxy? Before Jace could answer, the door opened again. A young woman bounced in, her hair a shocking violet, piercings glinting at eyebrow and nose. She wore a jacket covered in patches from a dozen different human colonies and at least 3 alien universities. Dr. Senna Ree reporting. She spotted the files on Kira's datapad. Oh wow, you're actually reading those? I figured my academic advisor submitted them as a joke. Or possibly revenge. Your dissertation proposed using controlled chaos theory to predict quantum fluctuations, Kira said. Your review board called it aggressively nonsensical. They lacked vision, Senna said cheerfully, dropping into a chair and putting her feet on the table. Also, I proved it worked. They just didn't like that I couldn't explain why it worked. That's exactly the kind of thinking I need. We're facing a threat that adapts to logical strategies. We need illogical ones. The door chimed again and a stocky woman in military fatigues entered. She had scars across her knuckles and the flat, assessing gaze of someone who'd seen combat. Commander Reina Solis. I was told this posting came with a recommendation from the Dominarchs themselves. She glanced at Jason Senna. This is the team? A retired hauler and a grad student. Theoretical physicist, Senna corrected. And you're the Marine who got court-martialed for disobeying orders during the Titan incident, then got reinstated when your disobedience saved 400 lives. Reina's expression didn't change. Following orders would have killed everyone. Sometimes the book is wrong. That's why you're here, Kira said. All of you. We're about to walk into a room full of species that have been doing this for millions of years. They have protocols. They have established procedures. They have logic. And we have what, exactly? Reina asked. Audacity, Jay suggested. Improvisation, Senna added. Sheer bloody-mindedness, Kira finished. The recursion is coming. It's an extra-dimensional threat that has nearly wiped out galactic civilization twice before. Every species fights it the same way, with overwhelming force and calculated strategy. And most of them die. She pulled up the projection of the spreading darkness. The Dominarchs think humanity might have an edge because we don't fight logically. We bluff. We improvise. We try things that shouldn't work. Sometimes they don't work, Reina pointed out. But when they do, they work spectacularly, Kira countered. I need people who can look at an impossible situation and see an improbable solution. People who won't back down when ancient beings tell them they're wrong. Jace leaned back. What's the actual plan here? We attend the Galactic Concordat. We analyze their standard defensive protocols. And we find the cracks, the places where conventional thinking fails. Then we propose alternatives. They'll hate us, Senna said cheerfully. Probably, Kira agreed. The Valdran Collective already thinks we're primitives. The Kesh warrior clans think we're cowards. The Crystalline Assembly thinks we're computationally deficient. Are they wrong? Reina asked. About the cowardice, yes. About the rest. Kira shrugged. We are primitives by their standards. We don't have their computational capacity. But we have something they don't. We remember what it's like to be outmatched. Every day. By everything. She stood, pacing. These elder species have been powerful for so long they've forgotten how to fight desperate. They've optimized their strategies over millennia. They've removed uncertainty, spontaneity, chaos. They fight like machines. And the recursion eats machines for breakfast, Jace said, understanding dawning. Exactly. It consumes information and adapts. The more predictable you are, the easier you are to defeat. But humans? Kira smiled. We've built an entire civilization on making it up as we go along. We're a species-wide improvisation. Senna's eyes lit up. Oh, this is going to be fun. When do we start? Tomorrow. The Concordat convenes on Arxis Prime. We'll be meeting representatives from 47 civilizations, some of whom have been spacefaring since before Earth had multicellular life. No pressure, Reina muttered. Actually, lots of pressure, Kira corrected. If we fail, the galaxy dies. But if we succeed, we prove that sometimes the newest voice in the room has the most important things to say. The door opened one last time. Ambassador Thalcorum entered, his 6 eyes blinking in that cascading pattern. The transport to Arxis Prime is ready. I hope you understand what you're getting into, Delegate Valen. Kira looked at her team, a retired pilot, a chaotic physicist, a rule-breaking Marine, and herself, a diplomat who'd built a career on finding common ground between incompatible species. Probably not, she admitted. But we'll figure it out as we go. The human way, Jace said. The only way we know, Kira agreed. The Concordat convenes. Arxis Prime was a world that existed purely for diplomacy. Its entire surface was one vast structure, meeting halls, archives, meditation spires, and neutral zones where species with incompatible biologies could interface through sophisticated translation fields. The planet had no native population, only the permanent staff who maintained it and the rotating delegations who came to shape galactic policy. Kira's team materialized in the reception plaza via quantum relay, and the sheer variety hit her like a wave. A crystalline being that communicated through light refraction stood beside a methane breather in an environment suit. A colony organism made of thousands of insectoid components argued with what appeared to be a sentient geometric equation. Beings of energy, matter, and stranger states of existence all gathered under the bronze sky. Stay close, Kira told her team. Don't antagonize anyone, don't agree to any challenges, and for the love of everything, Senna, don't try to scan anyone's biology without permission. That was one time, Senna protested, her handheld sensor already out. And I apologized. A delegation of Valdrant approached, towering beings with exoskeletons like polished obsidian and mandibles that clacked in complex rhythms. Their leader, High Administrator Zelkith, looked down at the humans with barely concealed disdain. The children have arrived, Zelkith said, their translator rendering the mandible clacking into standard with precise, cutting tones. I trust you will observe and learn. These proceedings are not a classroom, but for your species, perhaps they should be. Before Kira could respond, Reyna stepped forward. We're here to contribute, not observe. Zelkith's mandibles spread in what might have been laughter. Contribute? Your entire civilization could fit in one of our minor archive stations. What could you possibly contribute? Perspective, Jay said easily. We see things you might miss. We have been conducting galactic diplomacy for 18 million years. We miss nothing. Then you won't mind if we participate, Kira said with a diplomatic smile that didn't reach her eyes. Before Zelkith could respond, a resonant tone filled the plaza. The opening ceremonies were beginning. The grand amphitheater was a marvel that hurt to perceive, architecture that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, allowing beings with completely different sensory frameworks to experience it equally. Kira found herself seated, or hovering, or existing. The orientation was ambiguous, among thousands of delegates. At the amphitheater's center, a projection of the recursion rotated slowly. The spreading darkness looked even more menacing at this scale. Eldest Morvain appeared, their forms seeming to stand in all parts of the amphitheater simultaneously. The recursion approaches. Our projections give it 18 standard months to reach the galactic rim. As before, we must unite. As before, we must commit our resources. As before, we must fight. A crystalline assembly representative chimed in, literally their body producing harmonic frequencies. We have refined our defensive grid calculations. By establishing harmonic resonance barriers at these coordinates, star charts appeared. We can create a shell that will slow the recursion's advance by approximately 7%. The warrior clans can commit 3 battle fleets, rumbled a Kesh commander, their 4 arms gesturing at tactical displays. We propose concentrated strikes at the recursion's leading edge, temporal displacement weapons to scatter its coherence. The merchant combines will coordinate resource distribution, added a Yultharian trader, their tentacles dancing across holographic ledgers. We have optimized supply lines based on the previous recursion's consumption patterns. On and on it went. Each species presented their piece of the puzzle. Shields and weapons, logistics and calculations, strategies refined over millions of years. It was impressive. It was comprehensive. It was exactly what had failed twice before. Kira waited until there was a lull, then activated her delegation's speaking crystal. I'd like to propose an alternative approach. The amphitheater fell silent. Thousands of alien eyes, sensors, and perception organs focused on the human delegation. Delegate Valen, Morvain said neutrally, please proceed. Kira stood, trying to ignore how her hands wanted to shake. I've reviewed the records of the previous 2 recursions. The strategies being proposed today are virtually identical to those used before. Minor refinements, better technology, but fundamentally the same approach. Establish a defensive perimeter, slow the advance, strike at vulnerable points with overwhelming force. Because that approach is optimal, Zelkith said. It is the result of millions of years of tactical evolution. It's optimal for fighting conventional threats, Kira agreed. But the recursion isn't conventional. It consumes information. It learns. Every time you use the same strategies, you're teaching it how to counter you more efficiently. A murmur rippled through the assembled delegates. What would you propose instead? Asked a crystalline representative, their harmonics laced with skepticism. Chaos? Randomness? Surely you're not suggesting we abandon proven methodologies for improvisation. Not abandon, Kira said. Augment. Yes, establish your defensive grid. But make it unpredictable. Instead of optimal placement based on calculations, introduce deliberate inefficiencies. Place some barriers in suboptimal positions. Create gaps that look like mistakes but are actually traps. That's absurd, Zelkith snapped. Deliberate inefficiency is a contradiction of everything we've learned about warfare. Is it? Reyna stood, her military bearing commanding attention. In human military history, we've won battles by appearing weaker than we were. By making our enemies think they'd found an opening, then exploiting their assumptions. The recursion adapts to optimal strategies? Fine. Give it suboptimal ones. Make it waste resources adapting to false patterns. The mathematics don't support this, a crystalline delegate chimed. They wouldn't, Senna said, bouncing to her feet. That's the point. My dissertation work showed that certain quantum systems respond better to controlled chaos than to perfect order. The recursion exists partially outside our dimension. Standard physics might not apply to it the way we think. You're asking us to gamble the survival of civilization on might? Zelkith demanded. You're already gambling, Jace pointed out. Your optimal strategies gave you a 12% survival rate last time. We're suggesting you improve those odds by doing the unexpected. The amphitheater erupted into debate. Some species were intrigued, others outraged. The crystalline assembly argued about mathematical impossibilities. The warrior clans debated honor versus pragmatism. The merchant combines calculated risk ratios. Finally, Morvain raised a hand and silence fell. The human delegation's proposal is unconventional. We will table it for further analysis. Their ancient eyes found Kira's. However, I propose we form a subcommittee to explore alternative strategies. Delegate Valen, you will chair it. Unacceptable, Zelkith protested. They lack the experience. They lack preconceptions, Morvain interrupted. Which may be precisely what we need. The subcommittee will report back in 3 days with concrete proposals. This session is adjourned. As the amphitheater emptied, Kira's team gathered around her. Well, Senna said brightly, we've either just saved the galaxy or committed the most spectacular diplomatic suicide in history. 3 days to develop a battle plan against an extra-dimensional threat, Reyna said. No pressure. Kira watched the projection of the recursion still rotating at the amphitheater's center, that spreading darkness that had ended civilizations. We'd better get to work. Breaking the pattern. The strategy chamber they'd been assigned was a sphere of pure white light with surfaces that appeared only when needed. Kira's team had been working for 30 hours straight, sustained by stimulants that Senna had synthesized and that Reyna insisted on testing first, in case the physicist accidentally invented poison. Holographic displays floated around them. Recursion data, previous defense patterns, energy signatures, spatial topology maps. Jace had taken to pacing along what he insisted was the ceiling, though in the chamber's ambiguous geometry, it was hard to tell. Okay, Senna said, her violet hair standing in wild directions. I've run the simulation 63 times. Conventional defensive grids fail in 88% of scenarios. But if we introduce random variables, quantum flux generators, unstable wormholes, gravity wells that activate on non-periodic schedules, the recursion's adaptation rate drops by 42%. Because it's trying to adapt to noise, Reyna said, studying tactical overlays. It's wasting processing power on patterns that don't exist. Exactly. It's like, imagine you're fighting someone who's learned all your moves. So instead of using technique, you just start flailing. They can't predict it because there's nothing to predict. Controlled flailing, Kira mused. I can already hear Zelkitha's objections. The chamber door materialized, and Ambassador Thelcorum entered with 3 other delegates. A crystalline named Harmonic Seventh, a Kesh warrior called Dravax, and a floating energy being who introduced itself as Lumenis of the Radiant Consensus. We've been sent to observe your committee's work, Harmonic Seventh chimed. And, if warranted, to assist. Meaning they don't trust us, Reyna said. Meaning they're curious, Lumenis corrected, their light pulsing in what might have been amusement. Your species is unexpected. We wish to understand your thinking. Pull up a chair, Jace said, then paused. Do any of you sit? Dravax laughed, a sound like grinding stone. I like these humans. They ask obvious questions everyone else is too polite to voice. Over the next hours, something remarkable happened. As Kira's team explained their proposals, the other delegates began to contribute. Harmonic Seventh's computational abilities helped refine the chaos parameters. Dravax suggested ways to make defensive positions look vulnerable while actually being reinforced. Lumenis offered insight into energy beings' perception of dimensions, noting that the recursion might perceive reality differently than matter-based life. Wait, Senna said suddenly. Lumenis, you said the recursion might experience time non-linearly? It's possible. Its extra-dimensional nature suggests it might perceive all moments simultaneously. Then we've been thinking about this wrong. Senna started pulling up new displays. We're trying to block it spatially, but what if we hit it temporally? Create time loops, causality paradoxes, events that contradict each other? That would require an enormous amount of energy, Harmonic 7th calculated. And the temporal mechanics are impossible by conventional physics. Yeah, I know, Senna interrupted. But the recursion itself violates conventional physics. Maybe we fight paradox with paradox. Kira felt excitement building. What if we combine all of it? Spatial chaos, temporal paradoxes, and conventional defenses all mixed together? No pattern. No predictability. Just layers of different strategies that contradict each other? It's insane, Dravak said appreciatively. I volunteer the warrior clans for the frontline positions. The assembly can provide the computational power for managing the chaos variables, Harmonic 7th added, their harmonics brightening with what might have been enthusiasm. They worked through 2 more nights, the committee growing as word spread. A merchant combine coordinator arrived to help with logistics. A philosophical collective sent representatives to explore the ethical implications of weaponizing paradox. Even a few Valdrant began contributing, though Zelkith notably stayed away. On the 3rd day, Kira stood before the full Concordat once more. Behind her, the strategy committee, now 30 species strong, waited. We propose a multi-layered defense we're calling the Discordant Barrier, Kira began. The amphitheater filled with projections. Layer 1. Conventional defenses at optimal positions, shields, weapons platforms, fleet deployments. This is what the recursion will expect. Layer 2, Senna continued, quantum chaos generators creating random fluctuations in spacetime. No pattern, no predictability. The recursion adapts to optimal strategies, so we give it noise. Layer 3, Dravax rumbled, appears to be weaknesses in our line, gaps in coverage, undermanned positions. In reality, these are kill zones with concentrated firepower and dimensional traps. Layer 4, Harmonic 7th chimed, temporal disruption fields creating localized causality loops. Events that happen before their causes. Effects without origins. Paradoxes that shouldn't exist but do. And Layer 5, Luminese's light pulsed, something we're calling reality anchors. Points of absolute certainty in a sea of chaos. Places where the laws of physics hold firm, providing stable reference points for our forces but confusion for the recursion. Kira stepped forward. The recursion consumes information and adapts. We're proposing to feed it contradictory information, optimal and suboptimal strategies, order and chaos, causality and paradox, all existing simultaneously. It will try to adapt to everything and hopefully master nothing. This is unprecedented, someone said. It's brilliant, someone else countered. It's desperate, Zelkith declared, finally speaking. You're proposing we abandon millions of years of refined tactics for chaos. Controlled chaos, Kira corrected. Calculated unpredictability. The recursion has beaten us twice using our own predictability against us. Maybe it's time we became unpredictable. The simulations show a 37% survival rate, Harmonic 7th added. Triple our previous projections. The debate raged for hours. Species argued about resource allocation, strategic philosophy, the ethics of weaponizing paradox. But slowly, gradually, consensus formed. Finally, eldest Morvain stood. Let us vote. All in favor of implementing the discordant barrier. Lights, sounds, chemical signals, each species had its own way of voting. Kira watched the tally rise, her heart pounding. When it finished, the result was clear. 73% in favor. They were going to try it. As the amphitheater emptied, Morvain approached Kira. You've done something remarkable, Delegate Valen. You've united species that have argued for millennia. You've made the ancient young again, willing to try new things. We just offered a different perspective, Kira said. No, Morvain said softly. You reminded us that patterns can be broken. That's more valuable than any weapon. The recursion arrives. 14 months later, the galaxy held its breath. Kira stood on the command deck of the Harmony, a massive station positioned at the discordant barrier's control nexus. Around her, representatives from 47 civilizations worked in coordinated chaos, if such a thing could exist. Crystalline beings calculated quantum fluctuations while Kesh warriors monitored weapon systems. Merchant Combine coordinators managed resource flows while energy beings like Lumenis maintained the reality anchors. Her team had dispersed across the barrier. Jace commanded a fleet of navigation specialists, using their instincts to pilot ships through the deliberately chaotic defensive zones. Senna worked with Harmonic 7th at the Temporal Disruption Control Center, managing causality loops that made Kira's head hurt to think about. Reyna led a mixed-species battalion at one of the false weakness positions, ready to spring the trap when the recursion took the bait. Contact in 30 minutes, announced a Valdrant operator. Even Zelkith had come around, grudgingly admitting that desperation made for strange alliances. The display showed the approaching phenomenon. Space itself twisted and folded, reality collapsing inward in waves that defied description. The recursion wasn't moving through space, it was consuming space, erasing the very fabric of existence and leaving nothing. Not void, not darkness. True nothingness. All layers report ready, Kira said into the comm system that linked thousands of ships, stations, and defensive platforms. Remember, there is no optimal strategy here. Trust your instincts. Embrace the chaos. Make it up as you go. Very inspiring, Dravax's voice rumbled over the channel. I'm almost sorry I might die. Optimism, Commander, Kira said with a smile she didn't feel. Contact in 10 minutes. Kira pulled up a private channel to Morvain, positioned with the other Dominarchs at a strategic reserve point. Any last advice from beings who've survived this twice? Yes, Morvain said. Don't die. We've grown rather fond of you humans. The recursion hit the barrier's outer layer. Conventional defenses activated. Shields that had protected civilizations for millions of years, weapons that could crack planets, fleet formations perfected over eons. The recursion consumed them with contemptuous ease, just as it had before. Layer 1 failing as expected, reported a coordinator. Energy absorption rate is. Don't bother calculating, Kira interrupted. Activate Layer 2. Quantum chaos generators came online across a light year of space. Suddenly, the laws of physics became suggestions. Gravity waves rippled randomly. Particles existed in superposition states that shouldn't be possible. Energy flowed backward. Time hiccuped. The recursion's advance stuttered. It's trying to adapt, Senna's voice came through, excited despite the circumstances. It's consuming the data looking for patterns, but there aren't any. It's beautiful. Save the admiration, Reyna cut in. It's adapting anyway. Slower, but it's learning to ignore the noise. Expected, Kira said. All forces fall back to Layer 3 positions. Make it look panicked. Make it look like we're losing. Ships scattered in seemingly random directions. Defense platforms powered down. Entire sections of the barrier appeared to collapse. The recursion accelerated, pouring through the gaps. Now, Kira said quietly. The kill zones activated. Concentrated fire from hidden positions hammered the recursion's leading edge. Dimensional traps opened, folding space back on itself. The weak positions revealed themselves as heavily fortified strongpoints. The recursion recoiled, the first time in recorded history it had done so. It's working, someone shouted. Don't celebrate yet, Jace's voice warned. It's analyzing the trap. Give it 30 seconds and it'll have a counter. Then we don't give it 30 seconds, Kira said. Activate Layer 4. Senna, do your thing. With pleasure. Temporal disruption fields blossomed across the battlefield. Cause and effect divorced. Ships were destroyed before they were hit. Energy beams reached their targets and then were fired. Events happened in reverse, in loops, in impossible sequences. The recursion thrashed, its consumption patterns becoming erratic. It was trying to adapt to phenomena that violated basic causality. How could it consume information when that information contradicted itself? How could it learn patterns from events that happened before their causes? It's destabilizing. Harmonic Seventh's harmonics reached heights of excitement. The temporal paradoxes are creating feedback loops in its adaptation matrix. But the recursion was ancient and patient. Slowly, it began to isolate the temporal anomalies, to contain them, to adapt even to paradox. It's learning, Morvain's voice came through. As it always does. Then we hit it with the thing it can't learn, Kira said. Luminous, activate the reality anchors. Everyone else, improvise. No coordination. No patterns. Every ship, every platform, every soldier, do whatever you think might work. Don't ask permission. Don't wait for orders. Just try things. The reality anchors activated, points of absolute certainty in the chaos, places where physics worked exactly as it should. They seemed like targets, like obvious places to attack. The recursion focused on them. And into the space between chaos and order, thousands of individuals from 47 species did exactly what they'd been trained never to do. They stopped following protocols and started experimenting. A Kesh warrior fired her weapon backward, using the recoil to ram her ship into the recursion's edge. A crystalline calculated a solution to an equation that had no solution, creating a mathematical impossibility that briefly made the recursion pause. A human engineer from Earth's asteroid belt redirected his ship's waste disposal system to vent directly into a dimensional tear, creating a toxic mixing of realities. It was chaos. It was insane. It was completely unpredictable. And for the first time in 14 million years, the recursion encountered something it couldn't adapt to: the infinite creativity of desperate beings who refused to die according to someone else's pattern. It's retreating? Dravax sounded disbelieving. Is it actually? The recursion collapsed inward, folding back into whatever dimension had spawned it. Sensors showed it withdrawing, not destroyed but repelled. Confused. Unable to process a defense that had no logic. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then the cheering started. A new pattern. 3 months after the recursion's retreat, Kira stood once more before the galactic concordat. But this time the atmosphere was different. Where before there had been skepticism and condescension, now there was something approaching respect. The recursion remains at the galactic rim, Harmonic 7th reported, their harmonics tinged with cautious optimism. It appears to be observing, analyzing. Our long-range sensors detect no further advance. It's never done this before, Morvain said from their position among the Dominarchs. In previous cycles, once the recursion began its advance, it never stopped until it had consumed its fill and withdrawn naturally. We've never repelled it. Will it return? Asked a Yultharian merchant. Probably, Senna said, standing beside Kira. She'd been awarded a position as the Concordat's chief scientific advisor, the youngest being to ever hold the role by several million years. But now it knows we're unpredictable. It'll have to develop entirely new adaptation strategies. That buys us time. Time to do what? Zelkith asked. The Valdrant administrator had softened considerably over the past months, though their mandibles still clacked with characteristic precision. We cannot maintain the discordant barrier indefinitely. The resources required. We don't maintain it, Kira interrupted gently. We evolve it. The moment we create a new pattern, the recursion will learn to counter it. So we keep changing. Keep innovating. Keep being unpredictable. An exhausting prospect, Lumenis pulsed. But a living one, Dravax countered. Better exhaustion than extinction. Jace, now coordinating a fleet academy that taught pilots to trust their instincts alongside their instruments, spoke up from the gallery. The way I see it, the recursion taught us something important. We'd all become too comfortable with our patterns. Millions of years of the same strategies, the same thinking, the same approaches. We'd stopped evolving. The humans forced us to evolve, a crystalline delegate chimed. Uncomfortable as it was. And will continue to be, Reyna added. She'd been appointed as Joint Military Coordinator, overseeing integrated defense forces. We're proposing a new initiative, the Chaos Corps. Mixed species units trained specifically in improvisation and unconventional warfare. No species comprises more than 10% of any unit. Forced diversity, Zelkith said, but without their former disdain. Ensuring no single tactical philosophy dominates. Exactly, Kira said. The recursion proved that our greatest strength isn't our technology or our numbers, it's our diversity. 47 different species, each with unique perspectives, together creating something none of us could achieve alone. Morvain stood, their ancient forms seeming to shimmer with something like pride. The Dominarchs have observed galactic civilization for 23 million years. We have seen patterns emerge, persist, and eventually fail. We believed this was inevitable, that all things must follow predictable paths to predictable ends. The eldest looked directly at Kira. Your species has been spacefaring for 2 centuries. You know almost nothing of the galaxy's history. You lack the computational capacity of the crystalline assembly, the martial prowess of the Kesh clans, the temporal perspective of the Dominarchs. By every logical measure, you should have been irrelevant. Thanks, Kira said with a slight smile. And yet, Morvain continued, you broke the pattern. You showed us that sometimes the newest voice holds the most important truth. That inexperience can be an advantage. That diversity of thought matters more than depth of knowledge. The eldest gestured to the assembled delegates. I propose a formal change to the Concordat structure. Currently, representation is based on age, size, and resource contribution. I propose we add a new criterion, capacity for novel thinking. Let younger species have voices equal to the eldest. Let small civilizations contribute alongside the great empires. That would fundamentally restructure galactic governance, someone protested. Yes, Morvain agreed. It would break the pattern. Which is precisely why we must do it. The vote took hours. There was debate, negotiation, compromise. But in the end, the measure passed, not unanimously but by a significant majority. As the session adjourned, Kira found herself surrounded by delegates offering congratulations, asking questions, proposing collaborations. Humanity, the newcomers who'd stumbled into the galaxy barely 200 years ago, had somehow become central to its future. Later, in the quieter corridors of Arxis Prime, Kira's team gathered. So, Senna said, we accidentally restructured galactic civilization. That wasn't on my bingo card. We gave them permission to stop being so damn serious, Jace said. To try things. To fail and try again. To improvise, Reyna added. Like we've always had to. Kira looked at her unlikely team, a pilot who navigated by feel, a physicist who studied chaos, a soldier who broke rules to save lives, and herself, a diplomat who'd built a career on finding common ground. They were all, in their own ways, people who'd never quite fit their respective molds. You know what's funny? Kira said. We came here thinking we had to prove ourselves to the elder species. That we had to earn our place among beings millions of years old. And instead, Morvain said, appearing as if from nowhere, Dominarchs had a habit of doing that. You taught us that patterns are meant to be broken. That age can breed complacency as easily as wisdom. That sometimes the most important contribution is simply refusing to accept that this is how it's always been done. The eldest extended a hand, that very human gesture they'd adopted. Thank you, Delegate Valen. For walking into the oldest empire in the galaxy and making us young again. Kira took the hand, feeling the weight of eons in that grip and the promise of futures yet unwritten. Thank you for listening, she said. And for being willing to change. Change, Morvain said thoughtfully, is the only true constant. We'd simply forgotten that for a few million years. You reminded us. As the Dominarch departed, Kira turned back to her team. So what's next? I've got proposals from 6 different species wanting to establish cultural exchange programs with Earth, Senna said. The warrior clans want me to help redesign their tactical training, Reyna added. And I've been asked to navigate a route through a region of space that shouldn't exist, Jace said with a grin. Apparently I'm the go-to guy for impossible things now. We've set a precedent, Kira said. The galaxy is watching humanity, expecting us to keep being unpredictable, innovative, chaotic. Good thing we excel at chaos, Senna said cheerfully. Kira looked out at the bronze sky of Arxis Prime, at the ships coming and going from 1,000 different worlds, carrying beings of every imaginable configuration. Somewhere out there, the recursion waited, watching, adapting to the reality that the galaxy had changed its pattern. But the galaxy had learned something too. Patterns were meant to evolve. Traditions were valuable but not sacred. And sometimes the most ancient wisdom was knowing when to listen to the newest voice. A human delegate had walked into the oldest empire in the galaxy. And nothing would ever be quite the same.